Hi everyone, welcome to the One Stop Spreadsheets monthly and annual budget tutorial. This template is designed to help you take control of your finances, track your spending, and work toward your financial goals, all in an easy-to-use way. Whether you're budgeting for the first time or looking to upgrade your current system, this template has you covered. In this video, I'll walk you through each section of the template, show you how to set it up, and give you tips on how to get the most out of it. Let's get started. When you purchase the spreadsheet, you're going to get access to this PDF. It'll provide you access to this video tutorial and a selection of blank spreadsheets in multiple currencies. You can click on the currency of your choice, make a copy of that sheet, and start editing. So let's take a look at the spreadsheet now. I'm going to select the dollar option. First, make sure you're signed into your Google account. Once you're signed in, you should see this page. Click on Make a Copy. And shortly after, your copy of the spreadsheet will appear. Now you can go up here and rename the spreadsheet. Click 3 times on this text to select the entire name, then type the name you want to give your spreadsheet. I'm going to name mine 2024 Budget, and then hit Enter. Next, click on File, then select Settings, and under Locale, choose your country from the drop-down menu. This will make sure the spreadsheet formats the amounts according to your country's currency standards. Also, select your time zone from the drop-down here, and then click on Save Settings. For the best user experience, I recommend using the Google Chrome browser on your computer when editing the spreadsheet. If you want to use your mobile device, make sure to tap on the 3 dots in the top right corner of the Google Sheets app and choose View in Light Theme. Before we get started, I'd like to point out that the amount of space the main area of the spreadsheet takes up on your screen may vary depending on your screen size. In my case, I have a large screen, so I see some extra white space. We can adjust this by modifying the zoom setting. You can experiment with the values until you find one that works best for you. In my case, if I type 150 and hit Enter, the spreadsheet fits perfectly on my screen. Also, if you'd like to see more of the spreadsheet and less of the Google Sheets UI, you can go to View and select Full Screen. To exit full screen mode at any time, simply press the Escape key on your keyboard. You'll notice the spreadsheet has multiple tabs. This Quick Start Guide tab, which includes tips, common issues, and how to resolve them, a link to the video tutorial, and some contact information. A Setup tab where you'll define your income and expenses categories, a Budget tab where you'll set your budget for the year, a Monthly tab for every month of the year, an Annual Dashboard tab, and a Terms of Use tab with important information you should review on your own time. Once you've reviewed all the information in the Quick Start Guide tab and feel comfortable using the spreadsheet, you can delete this tab. To do that, right-click on the Quick Start Guide tab and select Delete, and then OK. There are cells in the spreadsheet that you can edit and cells that you should not edit to avoid breaking the preset formulas. Only cells with a clear background like this one are editable. If you try to modify a cell that shouldn't be changed, such as this one, you'll see a warning pop up letting you know that you're attempting to edit a protected part of the sheet. If you ever see this warning, make sure to hit Cancel. To avoid breaking the spreadsheet layout and formulas, do not cut and paste data, drag cells, or move them from one place to another, or add or remove rows or columns. If you accidentally perform any of these actions, use Command-Z on Mac or Control-Z on Windows to undo the changes. We're going to start with the Setup tab. Here, you can select your start date by double-clicking on the date field to open a date picker. You can then choose the date from which you want to start budgeting. I'm leaving mine on January 1st, 2024. Below that, the template displays the remaining days in the current year. I'm filming this tutorial in October and I have 87 days remaining. You can also see the currency to which this spreadsheet is formatted. This field is non-editable. Next, you'll see a section for your starting balance. If you don't have a starting balance, you can leave this at 0. If you do have a starting balance, like some money sitting in your checking account, go ahead and enter it here. This will provide you with a clear picture of your financial situation right from the beginning. We'll revisit the starting balance shortly, but for now, I'm going to leave mine at 0. Now, moving down, you'll find the income section. Here, you can enter your income sources such as paychecks, gifts, side hustles, and reimbursements. There's space to enter up to 25 income categories. Each income source can be classified as either regular or occasional income. Regular income refers to money you receive consistently, such as a monthly paycheck. In contrast, occasional income refers to earnings that aren't received on a set schedule, like bonuses, freelance work, or gifts. This categorization will be useful later, as it helps you understand where your money is coming from and how it varies between regular and occasional sources. I'm going to enter Paycheck 1 as my first income source. When you enter the names of your income categories, they will automatically be classified as regular. The first checkbox may take a couple of seconds to appear as the spreadsheet fully loads. If the income source is indeed regular, you can leave it as is. However, if it's an occasional income source, simply check the box under occasional, which will automatically uncheck the regular box. To revert an income source back to regular, just uncheck the occasional box. Please note that the regular checkboxes are non-editable and cannot be manually checked or unchecked. The variable and bills checkboxes function in the same way. I've now finished entering all my income sources and labeled them as either regular or occasional. Below the income section, you'll find an overview that displays the total number of income categories you have, along with a breakdown of how many are marked as regular and how many are marked as occasional. Now, let's move on to variable expenses. Variable expenses are those that are not fixed and can fluctuate from month to month based on usage, consumption, or choices. These expenses can vary depending on your lifestyle and spending habits. Some examples include groceries, clothing, household supplies, and dining out. These expenses are often more flexible and can be adjusted or reduced if needed to help manage your budget. Just like in the income section, you can enter up to 25 categories here. Each variable category can be marked as either essential or optional. For example, you might label groceries as essential, while dining out could be labeled as optional. This classification will help you understand your spending priorities as you create your budget and track your spending. Now, I'm going to enter my categories for variables and mark whether they're essential or optional. If you can't think of all your categories right now, that's okay. When you enter your transactions, if you find a category that you missed, you can always return to the Setup tab and add it. It's very important to keep your category names unique. For example, if you have gifts as a source of income and you also give gifts to others, do not include gifts under both sections. Instead, you can use names like gifts received or whatever other name that makes sense to you. Just ensure that all your category names are unique so the template can allocate transactions to the correct category. Here, you can also see the overview with your total, essential, and optional category counts. Now, let's move on to the bills section. Bills are recurring expenses that typically have a set due date. These amounts are usually fixed or semi-fixed. Common examples include electricity, internet, and phone bills. Just like in the variable expenses section, you can enter up to 25 categories for your bills. Each bill can also be marked as either essential or optional. Essential bills might include items like rent or utilities, while optional bills could be things like subscriptions or memberships. I finished entering my bills, and now I can see an overview of my categories down here. Now, let's move on to the debt section. Debt is money that you owe to another party, typically a lender or financial institution, which must be repaid over time, often with interest. Here, you can track up to 25 debt categories. Now I've entered all of my debt categories. Unlike the sections we've seen so far, the debt section doesn't have subcategories like essential and optional. Instead, there is a field where you can set a goal for how much you hope to pay toward your debt throughout the year. If you're starting to budget mid-year, be sure to consider how many days you have left until the end of the year and plan your goals accordingly. Setting a clear goal for your debt payments can help you stay focused and motivated to reduce your debts over time. If you're unsure what your debt payoff goal should be for the year, don't worry. You can always adjust it later in the Setup tab. For this example, I'll set my debt payoff goal to $25,000. Next is the investment section. Here, you can enter your investment categories, such as stocks, real estate, or any other investments you may have. Once you are done entering your category names, you can set a goal for how much you hope to invest over the course of the year. I'm going to set my investment goal to $6,000. Lastly, we have the savings section. Here, you can enter different savings categories, such as savings accounts, emergency funds, vacation funds, and so on. Savings refer to money set aside for future use and can be allocated for things like emergencies or planned expenses. I've just entered all my savings categories. Just like with debt and investments, you can set a goal for the year, and the template will help you track how much you've saved toward that goal over time. In this example, I set my savings goal to $5,000. If you don't have any debt, investments, or savings, simply leave that section blank. Now, let's move on to the Budget tab. Here, we'll enter our budget for the entire year for all the categories that we entered in the Setup tab. The budget reflects the amounts you expect to earn or spend in each category. You can see that both the total budgeted income and total budgeted expenses are at 0 right now. At the top, you'll see the months of the year. Underneath, you'll find the projected remaining balance at the end of each month. Let me give you a quick overview of how things work here. If we scroll down to the income section, you'll notice that the categories we defined in the setup page are shown here. Let's say we expect to earn $3,000 from Paycheck 1 in January. I'll simply type 3,000 and hit enter. You don't need to include the currency symbol. The sheet will automatically format your entry. Now let's scroll to the top and see what's changed. As you can see, the total budgeted income is now at 3,000, and the projected remaining balance for January is also at 3,000. We are essentially telling the template that we expect to earn 3,000 in January, and since we haven't entered any amounts for our expenses, the template assumes that we'll carry that 3,000 into the future months. Now, let's scroll down to the variable section and enter the amount we expect to spend on groceries in January. I'm going to enter 1,000. If we scroll back up, you'll see that the total budgeted expenses is now 1,000, and the projected remaining balance is 2,000 since we expect to earn 3,000 and spend 1,000 of it on expenses. Next, I'm going to scroll down and enter 1,000 for groceries in February without adding any income. As you can see, the template calculates that we will have 1,000 at the end of February, and that amount will carry over into future months. As you enter your income and expenses for those future months, the projected remaining balances will get updated accordingly. If I go back to the setup page and enter a starting balance of $10,000, the projected remaining balances will update accordingly. For example, starting with $10,000, if you earn $3,000 in January and spend $1,000 on groceries, you'll end up with $12,000 by the end of the month. In February, if you spend another $1,000 on groceries without any income, your balance will drop to $11,000, which will carry over into the following months. One important note is that the projected remaining balances are calculated based solely on your starting balance and budgeted amounts, not on actual transactions. If your actual transactions align perfectly with your budgeted figures and you enter all your transactions, then these projected numbers will match your actual remaining balances at the end of each month. I'm going to go to the Setup tab and set my starting balance back to 0. Next, I'll enter my budget for the month of January for each category. If you're starting mid-year, make sure to enter your amounts under your starting month. For Paycheck 2, I'll enter 3,000. If you don't expect to earn or spend money in a specific category, you can set the budget to 0. Once you're done budgeting for your income, move down to variable. For variable expenses and bills, you will enter the amounts you expect to spend on each category in the month you're budgeting for. And for debt, investments, and savings, you will enter the amounts you expect to allocate to each category. You may have noticed that the top section scrolls down with you, allowing you to see the projected remaining balance at the end of each month based on your budgeted amounts. These projected remaining balances can help you allocate your expenses effectively. I'm done entering my numbers for January. If your budget is going to be vastly different from month to month, go ahead and enter the amounts for the remaining months. If your numbers will be similar for every month, you can copy the amounts you entered for each section by clicking on the first cell and dragging to the last one. Then right-click and choose Copy. Next, go to the first empty cell of your next month. Click and drag down to match your last entry, then drag right until the cells under December are selected. Release the click and check your selection. If everything looks good, right-click on the selection and choose Paste. You should now see your numbers populated under all remaining months. If you make a mistake, use Command-Z on Mac or Control-Z on Windows to undo your last action. Now I can adjust these numbers if needed. For example, if I'm expecting bonuses in March, I'll click on that cell and type in the amount. I have now entered my budget for all sections and categories and made all necessary adjustments. If we scroll to the top of the budget page, you can see how much you've allocated to each section for the entire year. In this example, I'm expecting to make $90,300 in income and spend $87,855 on expenses, leaving me with a projected year-end balance of $2,445. Here, you can also see a visual representation of your total budgeted income and total budgeted expenses. The pie chart displays the breakdown of all your total budgeted expenses along with their percentages, allowing you to analyze your spending more effectively. Each section also provides some insights into the details of your budget. For example, I can see how much I'm expecting to make from my regular sources of income and how much from the occasional ones. For variables, I can see how much I've budgeted for essentials and how much is budgeted toward optional expenses, and the same thing for bills. The other three sections show your budgeted amounts compared to your goals. In this example, based on my budget amounts, I'm expected to come a little short on my debt payoff goal and investments goal, and to exceed my savings goal. Seeing this allows you to adjust your budget accordingly if needed. For example, I can allocate less to savings and put more towards investments. You can also go back to the Setup tab and adjust your goals if you want. Some of you may prefer not to include the money budgeted for savings in your total budgeted expenses, since that money is set aside and not actually spent. If you want to see what your total budgeted expenses would be without counting savings as an expense, you can use the drop-down menu to select the option that calculates total budgeted expenses as variable plus bills, plus debt, plus investments. Similarly, if you'd like to exclude investments from your total budgeted expenses, you can choose the variable plus bills plus debt option. Finally, if you only want to see variable and bills as your total expenses, you can select this option. When you change this setting, the total budgeted expenses and its corresponding charts will adjust accordingly. If you modify this setting, be sure to switch it back to the original option afterward to ensure that total expenses reflect all categories you've allocated funds to, giving you a complete view of your financial distribution. Please note that adjusting this setting does not affect your projected remaining balance. I'm going to switch back to the default option and click away to avoid accidental changes. This wraps up our work in the Budget tab. Since you'll be doing this once a year, it's totally okay to take your time and adjust it to fit your lifestyle. Remember, you can always come here and make changes as needed. Next, we'll move into the monthly tabs. I'm starting in January, so I click on this tab. Make sure you go to the month that you set your start date to. You'll be entering your actual transactions in these monthly tabs for each month of the year. So before I walk you through different sections of this tab, I'm going to scroll down to row 314. This is the transaction tracker, and this is the place where you'll enter your actual transactions from your credit cards or bank statements or your receipts. Entering transactions is extremely easy. The first thing you want to do is click on the drop-down under Type and select one of the 6 categories that your transaction belongs to. I'm going to choose Income here. Next, I'm going to click the drop-down under Category right in front of Income. And as you can see, the template gives me all my income options based on what I entered in the setup page. I'll choose Paycheck 1, and in the next column under Amount, I'll type in the exact amount as it appears on my bank statement. Let's say $2,885.41. That's it, we've entered our first transaction. There are 2 additional sections called Notes and Date, which are completely optional. When creating this template, My goal was to keep it simple and user-friendly by including only useful features and avoiding anything that doesn't add significant value. Personally, I find it tedious to enter dates for every transaction since they are already organized under monthly tabs. That said, I do use the notes and date features in certain situations. For example, if I come across a transaction in my credit card statement that I don't recognize, or if I'm expecting a refund, I'll add a description in the notes section and mark the transaction date for easy reference later. In any case, if you find it helpful, the options are there for you to use. The date and notes sections won't affect the functionality of the template. To choose a date, simply double-click the date cell and a date picker will pop up for easy selection. Next, let's enter a few more transactions. You can enter your transactions in any order you like. Just make sure you account for all your transactions. I'm going to click the second drop-down under Type and this time choose Variable. Then, under Category, I'll choose Groceries and enter 152.97 under Amount. You can enter up to 400 transactions per month. Another way to enter your transactions is to use your keyboard to select the type or category. For example, if this cell is currently selected and I type V, the list gets filtered to anything that starts with V. From here, if you press the Tab key, Variable will get selected and the focus jumps to the category field. Here, you can start typing your category name until it's the only option remaining, and then press Tab again to jump to the amount field. I'll then enter my amount and press Enter. Let's do this again. I type V and then Tab, I type Co, and since coffee is the only option left, I press Tab again and enter the amount and hit Enter. It's totally up to you whether you use your keyboard or mouse or a combination of both to navigate through the transaction tracker. Do what is more comfortable for you. If you need to delete an entry, simply click on the cell and hit the backspace key on your keyboard. It's very important to never cut and paste, copy and paste, or drag cells around in the transaction tracker. There are underlying formulas associated with each cell that will get copied and pasted and affect the template calculations. If for whatever reason you need to copy-paste anything in the transaction tracker, please make sure you do it in the following way. Click and drag to select the cells that you need to copy. Right-click and choose Copy. Then click on the cell where you need to paste the info. Once it's selected, right-click and choose Paste Special, and then from the menu that appears, choose Values Only. If you ever make a mistake, you can use Command-Z on Mac or Control-Z on Windows to revert the changes. One important point about entering transactions is that if you make purchases with your credit card and then pay off that balance from your bank account, that payment shouldn't be considered a debt payoff transaction since you've already accounted for the initial expenses. When entering your transactions, if you notice that you missed an expense or income category in the Setup tab, you can go back to the Setup tab to add new categories. Make sure you also go to the Budget tab after and enter the budget amounts for the new categories you added. Remember that when you allocate a budget to a category, it will affect your projected remaining balances. I've now entered all my transactions. The last thing about the transaction tracker that I'm going to cover is how to use these filters. If you click on this filter icon over here, this menu pops up. By default, everything is selected. Let's say you want to only see your bills. Click on Clear and then click on Bills. Then click OK. If this dialog pops up, click OK. Now only your bill transactions are showing. I always recommend resetting the filter after you use it so all your transactions are showing. To reset the filter, click on the filter icon again and click Select All and then OK. If this dialog appears, click on OK. Now we can see all the transactions again. You can also filter by category, amount, notes, and date. Let's say you only want to see your coffee transactions. You can clear everything and start typing coffee in this field. Once you find your selection, click on it and hit OK and OK again if needed. Now only the coffee transactions are showing. I'll reset this filter too. If these filters ever appear out of place, simply refresh your web browser and they should pop back into place. The amount filter shows you all the entered amounts, which might not be very useful unless you're looking for a specific transaction. But if you click on filter by condition and choose, let's say, greater than, then in this cell you can type in an amount, say 100. When you hit OK and OK, it will show you only transactions that are over $100. Now I'm going to clear the filter by clicking on greater than and choosing none, and then hit OK and OK. Alright, now you should be able to use the transaction tracker like a pro. Let's scroll to the top of the sheet and see what's changed. At the top, we have the total income and total expenses sections. These amounts are automatically calculated based on the transactions you've entered into the transaction tracker. You can also see your budgeted income here. The difference between your actual income and your budgeted income will be displayed here. If you make more than you budgeted, you'll see the difference in a green positive number. If you make less than your budget, you'll see a red negative number instead. You'll also see a chart that compares your budgeted income to your actual income, providing a quick visual snapshot of how your actual earnings stack up against what you expected. The total expenses section also shows the difference between your actual spending and the budgeted amount. If you spend more than your budget, this difference will be red, like here. And if you spend less, it'll be shown in green, indicating how much you spent below your budget. The total expenses section also has a chart that helps you quickly spot whether your expenses are over budget, under budget, or right on target. Then we have the very important total income versus total expenses chart. If your income is higher than your spending, you'll have a positive net income, which will be shown in green here. If your total expenses are higher than your total income, your net income will be a negative red number. Below the net income, you'll see a pie chart that shows the breakdown of all your expenses along with their percentage share. And over here, there's another chart that shows the breakdown of your total expenses and their amounts. Here, you have a drop-down similar to the one in the budget sheet that lets you exclude certain categories from your total expenses. For example, if you don't want to count the amount you put into savings as an expense, you can select this option. Doing so will adjust the total expenses to reflect only the sum of these 4 selected categories. Changing this setting will impact your net income but will not affect your remaining balance or future monthly sheets. After you complete your analysis, be sure to switch the drop-down back to include all categories to get a comprehensive view of your finances. Here, you'll find the projected remaining balance. While this number isn't as important as the other figures, it provides an estimate of what your remaining balance would be if your actual numbers matched your budget. Underneath, we have a much more important number, the remaining balance, which is based on the actual figures we've entered. As you can see, I started with $0, and since I have a net income of over $596 in January, this amount will carry over to the next month and will become February's starting balance. Here you can see your starting balance. Since this is the first month we've started budgeting, this will be the same number we inputted in the setup as our starting amount. I left mine at 0, but if we go back to the Setup tab and enter, say, $10,000 as my starting balance, you'll see that that number gets added to our remaining balance. Under the starting balance, you can enter an adjusted starting balance. Throughout the year, as you go through the monthly tabs, you might find that your actual balance differs from the starting balance that was carried forward from the previous month, perhaps due to a transaction you missed in the previous month. This could be a cash withdrawal you didn't mark, or an e-transfer you sent or received that wasn't accounted for in the transaction tracker. In any case, you can enter the updated balance in this section, and the template will use that adjusted starting balance as your starting balance for that month. The total budgeted expenses display the sum of what you've budgeted across the 5 categories of variable, bills, debt, investments, and savings. You'll notice a green bar below the remaining balance. If your remaining balance is the same as or higher than your starting balance, as it is here, this bar will be at 100%. If your total expenses exceed your total income, your remaining balance will decrease, and this bar will shorten accordingly. I'm going to go to the Setup tab and set the starting balance back to $0. Now let's scroll down to explore these 5 sections. The variable section displays our actual spending on variable expenses. The pie chart below, by default, shows these expenses as a percentage of your income. For example, I've spent 33% of my income on variable expenses. You can also use the drop-down to switch the view to show the percentage of total expenses. In my case, variable expenses account for 36% of my total expenses. Keep in mind that if you change how total expenses are calculated using this drop-down, the percentage will be recalculated based on the updated total expenses. Here, you can see the amount we budgeted for this month. Below that, you'll find the difference between our actual spending and the budgeted amount. For both variable and bills, if you exceed your budget, this difference will be displayed in red. On the flip side, if you spend less than budgeted, it will appear in green as a negative number, indicating how much you spent below your budget. Then, there's a breakdown of variable into essential and optional categories, based on what you marked as essential or optional in the Setup tab. This breakdown is automatically calculated to show you how much of your variable expenses were essential and how much were optional. In my example, I've spent just over $1,600 on essentials and about $1,037 on optionals. If you need to trim down on your expenses, these optionals are usually worth a closer look. We have a similar breakdown for our bills. In this case, most of my bill payments have gone toward essential bills, and I'm spending about $130 on optional bills. Unlike variable and bills, if you put more than you budgeted towards debt payoff, investments, or savings, the difference will be shown in green. If you fall short in any of these categories, like my savings over here, the difference will be shown as a red negative number, indicating the shortfall. In these three sections, you can see the goals we set for the year, along with how much we've contributed toward those goals so far. The pie chart for these three sections also includes an additional option to display your progress in achieving your goals. Now, let's scroll down to the income section. On the left, you'll see all your income categories along with their budgeted amounts, actual amounts, and the differences for each category. If you made less than budgeted, the difference will appear in red. If you earned more than expected, the difference will be displayed in green. At the bottom, we also have the total figures. The first chart in this section displays our top 5 income categories where we earned less than expected, ordered from lowest to highest. In my example, I anticipated to receive $3,000 from paycheck 1, but I ended up with about $114 less. I was also expecting $250 in reimbursements, but I only got about $201. I've included this chart at the top left because it's crucial to meet your income expectations. If you fall short, it's important to investigate the reasons behind it. If there are no categories where you earned less than budgeted, this chart will be empty, showing a 0. This other chart displays the top 5 categories where you earned more than your budgeted amounts, shown in green and ranked from highest to lowest difference. In my example, I have 3 categories where I made more than I expected. Below these 2 charts, you'll find a chart illustrating how much of your income comes from regular sources compared to occasional sources. Beneath this chart is a tree map that displays your income categories in boxes that are sized according to their contribution to your total income. In this case, most of my income is generated from regular sources, while a smaller portion comes from occasional sources like side hustle and gifts. To the right, there's an income overview section displaying your total income at the top, followed by a pie chart. The pie chart has 2 options, which can show you your regular income and your occasional income as a percentage of your total income. Next, we have the budget along with the corresponding difference, and a chart comparing your budget and actual income. In this example, I earned about $530 more than I expected. As you know, our income sources are broken down into regular and occasional. You can see the details for these subcategories below. Here, you can see the budgeted amount for your regular income. You can also see your actual amount for your regular income here. Below that is the difference between the two and a chart which allows you to see if you made what you expected from your regular income sources. Then, we have the same details for our occasional sources of income. The bottom part of the income section features 2 charts. The one on the left breaks down all your income sources, ranked from highest to lowest. In this case, most of my income came from my 2 paychecks. The final chart displays your income categories in the order you defined them in the Setup tab. Your actual amounts are represented by green columns, and their budgets are indicated by a gray dashed line. If we take a look at the variable section, you'll notice it closely resembles the income section we just reviewed. Here, you'll find your categories, budgets, actual amounts, and differences. As mentioned earlier, if you spend more on variable expenses, those differences will appear in red, making it easy to identify which categories went over budget. The top 5 categories that went over budget will be displayed here, and it's important to pay attention to these areas since you're spending more than you anticipated during budgeting. And this chart shows your top 5 categories where you spent less than budgeted, ordered from lowest to highest. For example, I budgeted $100 for clothing, but since I didn't spend any money on clothing, I'll see that number here. Next, you'll see your variable expenses broken down into essential and optional categories, along with their corresponding amounts. This breakdown helps you understand how much you're spending in each area and allows you to prioritize your expenses accordingly. Next, we have our tree map chart that visually represents our variable expenses in boxes, with their size reflecting their portion of the total. There are 2 things I want to point out about these tree map charts. The first thing is, if you click on them once and hover your mouse over different categories, you'll see a tooltip pop up showing you the amount spent on that particular category. The second, if you double-click on variable at the top of the chart editor will show up on the right. You can just ignore this. Now, look what happens when I click on optional. As you can see here, the chart dives into the optional category and shows all your optionals. And if we use this back button, you can go back and dive into the other category. Once you're done with your analysis, click on this X to close the chart editor. On the right, you'll find information similar to what we saw in the income section, but this pie chart offers 4 options. These options allow you to see how essential and optional expenses compare to your total income or to your variable expenses as a whole. For example, I can see that 20% of my income was spent on essential variable expenses, while 13% was spent on optional ones. Additionally, you can view what percentage of your variable expenses consist of essentials versus optionals. We also have the budget, actual, and difference for our essentials, and the same for our optionals, allowing you to dive deeper into specific areas of your variable spending. At the end of the variable section, we have this chart showing the breakdown of all our variable expenses and the variable by category chart, which will allow you to analyze your variable categories and their budgets and actuals. The bill section operates in a similar manner to the variable section we just covered. You can double-click the tree map chart to explore the breakdown of your essential and optional bill categories. This section also provides the same overview and detailed information that we saw earlier for variable expenses. At the bottom, the pie chart displays the breakdown of your bills, and bills by category highlights your bill categories along with their budgets and actual amounts. The next 3 sections have formulas that are date sensitive, and because I'm filming this tutorial in October, I'll first change my computer date to January and then come back and show you around. The debt section below the bills has a similar layout, so I'll just point out the differences. As we discussed earlier, if you put less than your budgeted amounts toward your debt, the difference will be shown in red. And you can see the top 5 categories in this chart here. The chart to the right shows you the opposite. As you know, the debt, investments, and savings sections don't have subcategories like essential or optional. Instead, here you'll see the total amount that you've contributed toward debt payoff and the amount you have left to reach your goal shown instead. The pie chart on the right has 4 options. You can see your debt payments as a percentage of income or a percentage of total expenses. You can also see your progress this month and your total progress toward your goal. You also can see your goal, paid this year, left to goal, and total progress down here. At the bottom, the template also estimates how many months are left till you reach your goal, and the estimated date you will reach your goal based on the start date you chose in the Setup tab and how much you've contributed towards your goal so far. The charts below provide the same type of info you're familiar with by now. The investments and savings section both have the exact same components as our debt section, and you should be able to find your way around the info provided here easily. This wraps up the tutorial for the monthly tabs. The last section we're going to look at is the annual dashboard. I'm going to enter the transactions for a few more months and show you the annual dashboard. This section is very similar to the monthly dashboards, except these figures represent your numbers for the entire year. Since we've covered the monthly dashboard, I'll just point out what's different in the annual dashboard. Here, you'll find your start date, starting balance, and the total adjustments made to your starting balance throughout the year. Below that, there's a total income to total expenses ratio. If this number is above 1, it will be displayed in green. If it's below 1, it will appear in red. These sections function just like those in the monthly tabs, but they present annual figures instead. These detailed sections resemble the ones in the monthly tabs, but at the bottom of each section, you'll find additional charts and a monthly average for that specific category. You can view your earnings by month, ordered from highest to lowest. In this case, I made the most in June and the least in February, not counting the 3 months of October, November, and December, where I still haven't entered my transactions. To the right, you'll see a comparison of actual and budgeted income over the months, making it easy to identify which months exceeded your budget and which ones fell short. Additionally, there's an average monthly income section. Then, you can see an overview of how your regular and occasional income compare to each other throughout the year. You can find the same type of info for the variable and bills section. The debt section also follows a similar pattern. You also get the extra charts so you can analyze how you did over the year. In the debt section, you'll see a chart that shows your goal and your progress toward it this year. The investments and savings also include similar data to the debt section. This wraps up the tutorial. I'm dedicated to continuously enhancing this template, so to stay up to date on the latest improvements, new product releases, and useful tips and tricks, be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thank you so much for purchasing this product. If you enjoy using this spreadsheet, I would love to hear about it, so please consider leaving a review. If you have any questions or run into any issues, do not hesitate to contact me. The link to my store and this product is in the video description. By following the steps outlined in this tutorial, you now have a personalized tool to help you track your income, expenses, and financial goals. Remember, the key to effective budgeting is consistency and regular review. Take time each week or month to update your template, reflect on your spending habits, and adjust your goals as needed. This will empower you to make informed financial decisions and stay on track toward achieving your financial objectives.